Salut, c'est Vincent, j'espère que vous vous portez bien dans ces moments difficiles. Vu que c'est le 50e anniversaire de la mission Apollo 13, avec la team de Swiss Apollo, on a eu une bonne idée, ce serait d'interviewer quelqu'un qui a travaillé sur cette mission et voir ce qu'on peut en apprendre par rapport à la crise qu'on est en train de traverser actuellement. Donc j'ai eu l'immense honneur de pouvoir interviewer à nouveau Gerry Griffin, qui était directeur de vol, enfin l'un des directeurs de vol sur la mission Apollo 13, la vraie, pas le film, puisque durant le film, lui, il était aussi consultant technique. Donc oui, on peut parler du film et de la mission, et c'est justement ce qu'on fait pendant cette petite heure d'interview, et on parle aussi de ce qu'on peut en apprendre, et comment on peut transposer ça à la crise qu'on est en train de traverser actuellement. Donc cette interview, forcément, elle a été faite en temps de confinement, donc c'est pour ça que vous avez ce setup un peu étrange, et que vous verrez que Gerry est interviewé par webcam par internet. Donc c'est pour ça que la qualité n'est pas forcément au rendez-vous. Dans tous les cas, le contenu est là, vous avez à peu près 1 heure d'interview, on verra ce que ça donne au montage. Et vous avez aussi un timecode dans la description, si vous voulez, et aussi en commentaire épinglé, si vous voulez directement sauter des passages et aller au passage qui vous intéresse. Dans tous les cas, j'espère que vous portez bien, prenez soin de vous, et si le contenu vous plaît, n'hésitez pas à la fin à laisser un petit like, un petit commentaire, à partager, à vous abonner, enfin, vous connaissez le cirque. Je vous laisse avec l'interview avec Vincent du passé. Salut. Bonjour Gerry, alors on va commencer par faire un petit peu votre résumé, votre CV. Donc avant d'entrer à la NASA, vous avez travaillé comme ingénieur dans l'Air Force, c'est ça?
Actually, I was flying in the Air Force, and when Al Shepard flew, I decided I really wanted to get into the space business. So I got out of the Air Force after I fulfilled my commitment and went to work in the Satellite Test Center for the Air Force as an engineer for Lockheed Missiles and Space Company. So it was a really kind of an easy transition. I didn't know much about space because I was an aeronautical engineer, and in college there was no aerospace. So we kind of had to figure out what an orbit was and how you affected it and all that sort of thing. But that broke me, and I was trying to get to NASA the whole time, but it took me a little while before I got there. And I finally arrived at NASA in 1964, right before we started to fly Gemini. And so Gemini and Apollo, I was in mission control the whole time.
Oui, vous étiez à la position GNC.
Right. For Gemini, I was a GNC, Guidance, Navigation, and Control Systems. And then I was going to be a GNC for Apollo, and was in the control center the night the Apollo 1 fire occurred. And after that, Chris Kraft decided he wanted 3 more flight directors. So between the time of the fire and the time we flew the first manned mission, he made me named 3 of us actually as flight directors. And so I was a flight director for all Apollo.
Donc vous étiez directeur principal sur Apollo 12, 15 et 17.
Correct.
Et vous étiez le directeur de vol en chef, responsable de l'atterrissage lunaire sur Apollo 13.
Yes, I was to do the landing on Apollo 13. And of course, when that got scrubbed, we all started cycling around and making sure to get them home. By the way, I did get to do the landing on 14 and on 16 and 17. So I got 3 of the 6. My team and I were the fortunate ones that got to do that. But yeah, I was 13 was we really got scrambled up after the oxygen tank exploded, and we knew pretty quickly we weren't going to land, and so we redid the manning list. As a matter of fact, we took Gene Kranz's team kind of offline, and since they were on duty when that tank exploded, we figured they knew the most about how they powered the command module down, and therefore would be in the best role to figure out how to power it back up. That's kind of missed in Apollo 13. That is very interesting. Apollo, the command module and the lunar module were powered up at the launch pad in Florida. And we had, when they were down there, they had a lot of ground support. We called it ground support equipment, electrical input, water, all kinds of what we call that ground support equipment. We referred to it as GSE. We had to have an abbreviation, but the GSE was really what got the vehicle started. Once it got up and running prior to launch, we never turned one off. And in the case of the command module, we turned it completely off. And so then it was a real test of the people on the ground to figure out how to power it back up again without blowing out every circuit breaker and all of that. That's what took so long. But Gene's team, Gene Kranz's team, was offline and got to do that. Now they did come back for the entry because they were best suited for the entry. And but turns out the other three teams we had, which was Glenn Lunny and Milt Wendler and me, that made the third. We just rotated shifts until that re-entry point came back.
Donc, on reviendra sur Apollo 13 un peu plus tard, mais après votre travail de directeur de vol, vous avez été consultant en film, notamment sur le film Apollo 13, vous étiez consultant technique, mais aussi sur le film Contact et Deep Impact.
Right.
Mais au-delà de ça, donc après votre travail de directeur de vol à la NASA, vous avez été directeur adjoint au centre Dryden, directeur adjoint au Kennedy Space Center et à la fin, directeur du Johnson Space Center à Houston, au Texas.
That's right.
Donc ma question elle est simple, qu'est-ce que vous faites maintenant?
Well, actually now, in many ways, I'm busier than I've ever been in my life. I've always had a consulting business ever since I got out of NASA, and I've served on several boards, and I still, boards of directors, and I still do that. I've got two boards that I serve on now, and I still have my consulting business. But what I've really been busy with is celebrating 50th anniversaries of all these Apollo missions. It really got started with, well, clear back to 7, which was the first man and mission. And of course, it hit a big crescendo on Apollo 11. And I was all over the country. In fact, I was in France when I saw you. I was in Australia or earlier, actually, right before that. And I ended up being all over the United States. Now, the 50th anniversary of Apollo 12 was a little more subdued, but still, I had events all over the country. And then 13 has been almost like Apollo 11. A lot of celebrations. Tragically, many of them had to get postponed because of the virus. And as a matter of fact, most of them are being reset for the fall. And hopefully we can get those in. And it's interesting because 13, with its oxygen tank problem, there was a pretty good gap until 14 flew. I think it was February of next year would be our 50th. So we've got a little time in there to celebrate 13 if we can just get it scheduled and done in the fall. But I've been busy. I'm as busy as I've ever been in my life.
Et c'est assez marrant que vous disiez tout ça parce que quand on y pense, on peut faire une comparaison entre aujourd'hui la hype qu'on a aujourd'hui sur les célébrations des 50 ans et la hype qu'on avait à l'époque, c'est-à-dire que on a eu une hype montante jusqu'à Apollo 11 à l'époque, puis ensuite après avec Apollo 12 dans les médias on n'en entendait plus trop parler, et puis après avec Apollo 13 il y a eu une remontée dans les médias et ensuite c'est redescendu. C'est assez marrant.
That's right. That's exactly right. The cycle was really big 11, a dip in 12, back at 13, and then back down to 14. The last 3 missions got a little more attention because of the rover, and it was a little different. And you can see guys scooting around the surface of the moon in a car, and longer missions and much more science oriented. So it really turned on the science community. By the time we got to those last 3 missions, we were pretty comfortable with this, with the spacecraft and all of that and how it worked. And so even in the control center, we really started emphasizing getting the science that we knew we could do, particularly with the rover, where the crew could get out a lot further away and get things done.
Oui, je vois, mais sans jamais être trop confiant.
No, no.
Ouais, c'est quelque chose qu'il faut pas avoir quand on est contrôleur de vol ou directeur de vol, c'est avoir trop confiance en soi et être aveuglé par la confiance qu'on a.
That's right. That's exactly right.
Donc revenons rapidement à Apollo 13. Comme vous l'avez expliqué précédemment, il y a eu tout un cirque qui s'est mis en place. Quelle était votre implication dans ce grand cirque, et aussi qu'est-ce que vous avez ressenti à ce moment-là, parce que vous les connaissiez, les astronautes, personnellement?
Oh yeah. The astronauts, all of them, and all of Apollo were really good friends. We lived close together. Many of our kids went to school together and played together, and so yeah, we were very close people. It's funny, on 13, I got off shift. My shift ended with my team, and we handed over to Gene Kranz and his team, and that's when the tank exploded several hours later. I told him, I've joked with him over the years that when I left, everything was completely good, and you managed to let it go to heck. And but we've laughed about that quite a bit. Actually, I was out playing a softball game at night, and they actually notified us that there had been a problem and that we probably should get back to the control center. So we did. Another fellow and I, another flight controller. And it was interesting, when I walked in the control center, there were more people there than normal, but it was calm. It was not too wild. And in fact, in the movie with Ron Howard, there were always people moving around and all that. And I kept saying, you need to, calm that down. That's not the way it was. One thing I could tell is that he didn't like to have scenes with still people standing still or sitting still. So, yeah, I stuck around long enough to get the basic idea of something was going on. We had lost a bunch of oxygen, and they had started to power up the lunar module to use it as a lifeboat. And about that time, I decided I'd better get home and get some sleep, because we reworked the schedule, and I was to follow Glenn Lunny, who came in and relieved Gene Kranz's team about the time they started to get into the lunar module. So I went home and tried to sleep, and I couldn't. And by the time I got back, the schedule had been worked out, how all the teams were going to cycle, and the fact that we were letting Gene figure out what they had done and how best to power up the command module. The interesting thing about all of that, in fact, when Ron Howard listened to the voice tapes and all, he said it didn't sound like there was much of a problem. And in fact, I could tell he wasn't sure he was going to make that movie, because he wasn't sure there was enough emotion in it. And I told him, I said, no, there was plenty of emotion. We didn't have time to express it. And we never talked about not getting them back. We said, okay, here we go. Let's knock this thing out and see if we can get them back okay. So we never talked about not getting them home. And we had been, the reason we could do that is it's the way we were trained. We did hours and hours of simulation and before a mission. and the simulation people that could throw in problems and all that, they really exercised us hard. They could bring us to our knees eventually if they gave us enough failures. We couldn't deal with them all. But what all that training did, we hadn't seen exactly that kind of simulation, but we were ready for it because we just normally got into a cadence and a rhythm of let's get this thing solved and get it done. That came from the training. So I always think it's important to recognize it. And I tell the people for the future, the Artemis and more that are going to go beyond that, the training was the key to our success in leaving Earth and going somewhere else. And I think it's going to be just as true in 2030 or 2050 or whenever as it was in the 1960s and 70s. So 13 came out successfully, I think, because of the training we had and the crew. The astronauts were trained much the same way, exhaustive simulation. And I'll make one final point on that. In many ways, except for Apollo 13, all the flights were easier than the simulations. The simulations were tougher because we usually ended up learning something that we hadn't, and many times we had to abort or we crashed or something because the sim guys really laid it on us. And it's a little bit like a marathon runner practicing on the beach and then running on a hard surface. It was easier to do the real thing than it was the training, but it prepared us, and that was the secret of Apollo 13.
Ouais, en fait, ce qu'on peut dire, c'est que vous restiez très professionnel, vous gardiez les émotions en vous, mais une fois que Apollo 13 avait améri, là, vous pouviez tout relâcher et montrer vos émotions.
That's true. After the landing was successful, we got them back. We didn't celebrate till they got onto the carrier deck of the carrier because we always felt like that, they might drown or something if the helicopter didn't work right or crashed or something. So when they stepped out on the carrier, it was an emotional relief, joy, celebration. And we had one heck of a party that evening. And we were all tired. We were exhausted because we hadn't slept much, but we were all young too. We were in our mid-30s, and several guys in the control center were in their 20s. And so we were young and kind of resilient. But the next day is when President Nixon came and presented the Medal of Freedom to the whole teams. And I look at that picture and I can see fatigue. We were all tired, and not only from the mission, but from the night before. And but we got through it all, and it was just fun. But yeah, it was happiness and satisfaction. There was satisfaction.
D'ailleurs, on peut le voir sur une photo qui est devenue célèbre de la mission Apollo 13. Vous êtes à côté de Gene Kranz avec le cigare.
Yeah.
Et on peut décrypter vraiment sur votre visage, on peut vraiment voir une sorte de mélange entre la joie et ce sentiment de ça y est, on l'a fait. C'est l'accomplissement, on a réussi. On l'a fait, quoi.
You're exactly right. And late in the entry into the Earth's atmosphere, we had blackout, and that was normal due to the heat, the sheath of fire coming around it. And then we didn't come out of blackout on time. And that was an interesting time because nobody said a word. Everybody was looking forward, didn't look at each other. But I know we were all thinking, oh gosh, maybe that explosion damaged the heat shield and they didn't make it into the atmosphere. They burned up. And when we And I'll never forget Joe Kerwin, astronaut, was the Capcom, and he kept calling Apollo 13, this is Houston, Apollo 13. About every 15, 30 seconds, he would call. No answer. Finally, one of the times he called, he said, Apollo 13, this is Houston. And Swagger came back, oh, hello, Houston, how you doing? We're doing fine. And we all went, oh, we almost fell out. And that was the moment where I think we were probably the happiest in the whole. And when we, about that same time, we saw the parachutes with the command module on the bottom of it. And so we knew that we had a good chance of finishing up the mission then, and that was a great relief. And then when they stepped on the carrier deck, it was light the cigars and pat each other on the back. I bet we stayed in that control center for 30 minutes, shaking each other's hands and that kind of thing. It was neat.
Donc après Apollo 13, au moment d'attaquer Apollo 14, j'imagine que vous aviez peut-être des craintes, plus de craintes en tout cas qu'avant, vis-à-vis de l'envoi d'une nouvelle mission. Est-ce que vous ressentiez quelque chose de plus? Est-ce que vous disiez, avec ce qui est arrivé à Apollo 13, j'ai peur qu'il arrive la même chose à Apollo 14 ou un truc du genre?
No, we didn't change. Obviously, we made some changes in the spacecraft to make sure that kind of thing didn't happen again, and change the tank inner design and all that. And 13 was kind of an eye opener in some ways, because we had been very successful up through 11. After we started on 7 and up through 11, we'd had some problems, but nothing that was a showstopper. So 13 was kind of a wake-up call to, just a good reminder, which we all knew, this is not an easy task. This is hard business, and it can bite you very easily when you're not expecting it. We certainly weren't expecting it on 13. So I think it probably did sharpen us up a little bit and put us in good shape to go 14, 15, 16, and 17 to finish the program. But in terms of changing the way we did business in the control center, we didn't. We thought we were organized okay. We started the program with 6 flight directors, and that's the way we ended it. We started with 7 and ended with Apollo 7, and we ended with 17, with 6 of us still circulating around and getting some relief. And we, if you'll notice in the later Apollo missions, and in fact it was true in 13, we actually had gone to 4 teams. We started the program with only 3, but we found out it was a little easier to schedule having the right team on at the right time at the point in the mission to do the landing or the ascent on the moon or whatever. It was easier to do that with 4 teams rather than 3. So it spread the workload a little bit, and it worked well. 13, I'm glad we had the 4 teams, because it did allow us to get Kranz off and let him work on the solution of getting that command module powered back up. And so 13 was good exercise. I'm glad it came. In fact, Jim Lovell, I've heard him say about that blackout period where we went into blackout right on time, and usually within a second we could predict when we would come out, and it just went on and on and on. And he said, actually, he was joking, of course. He said, actually, we could hear you all the time, but I thought it might make a good movie. And then he laughs real big. So there was some humor that came out of it, not too much while we were in the middle of it, but when it was all over, we've enjoyed talking about it.
Ouais, je vois. Et sur un aspect un peu plus personnel, est-ce que ça a changé quelque chose dans votre vision peut-être de voir la vie?
I didn't. have any personal changes. I had been, as I mentioned earlier, I'd been in the Air Force. I had flown and seen aircraft. A guy, I'd have breakfast with him in the morning, and he'd be dead in the afternoon due to a crash. And when you're in your early 20s, after a while, you build up a little bit of a scar tissue, and try not to let it affect you too much. It always affects you, but and the same thing with missions that, like 13, that you didn't accomplish everything that you set out to do. So in that way, it was a failure, but it was a very successful failure, and so we were pleased at the outcome. And there were no big attitude changes on my part. Now, I don't know of anybody that did, but there could have been. That was back in the days of macho. You didn't show emotion as easily as maybe you do now, but we stayed professionally attuned, pretty much the way I think all of us did. I know I did, until we got to the very end. And then I kind of thought, what next? Well, it was shuttle. And actually it was ASTP and Skylab, but that was Apollo hardware. And I was already gone by that time. I had gone to Washington to headquarters. And but then I got back into the operational business when I went as deputy director at Dryden. It's when we did the approach and landing test with the shuttle. And then I went to the Cape, and I was there until we launched the first shuttle. And then I came back to Houston. So after that, I got back to the fun stuff. Washington was like going to Paris. I mean, too much government, too much red tape. Things happen slowly, and I told my super bosses there. I told them I had to get back to the real world. Please send me anywhere, and they did. They were kind to me.
Oui, en fait, je posais la question surtout parce que pendant la crise d'Apollo 13, on a vu pas mal de gens dans la rue et dans les médias dire mais en fait, pourquoi on va encore sur la Lune? À quoi ça sert? On y est déjà allé avec Apollo 11 pour battre les Russes. Ensuite, on a eu Apollo 12. Bon, c'était grosso modo la même chose. Apollo 13, voilà, on voit que les mecs, ils prennent des risques. En plus, on a perdu 3 astronautes sur Apollo 1. À quoi ça sert de continuer? C'est un peu ça qu'on entendait. Et je voulais savoir si, justement, au sein du Mission Control ou à Houston, en général, s'il y avait des gens qui travaillaient sur le programme Apollo qui se sont dit peut-être la même chose et qui se sont dit, mais en fait, pourquoi je continue à travailler sur ce programme? Pourquoi je fais ça? Je devrais arrêter, quoi.
Well, that's good. It's a good question. Anything that's got a risk, you've got to figure out if the risk is worth taking. It's just like getting on an airliner and flying from Paris to Houston. And you finally decide, yes, that's worth the risk for the gain that you get out of it. And I think space is pretty much the same way. Is the risk worth the gain? One thing I think is really important to remember is that Apollo going to the moon even 6 times was a little teeny baby step of what I think human species is going to have to do eventually. And that's to go much deeper to other places, and for a reason, not only scientific curiosity and knowledge, but one day, and I'm not talking global warming or anything like that, that could be a piece of it, but we may use this planet up. And if the human species, 1,000 years from now, 10,000 years, I don't know when, wants to survive, then we're likely going to have to find someplace else to take the species. So this little baby step that we took to get to the moon, I think just proves the concept that we can do it. It can be done. And with better technology, newer technology, long range things that we don't even know about now, we can't even imagine. We could stand on the shoulders of Apollo and start to take those next steps. And Apollo will look like, a flight of Orville and Wilbur Wright, or somebody, and early Frenchman that flew some funny looking airplanes. That's what Apollo will look like one day. Not yet, but one day that it'll be so primitive that how'd they do it? And in fact, I get that question now, and I don't know. I'm not, that was 50 years ago. It's hard to imagine that it was 50 years ago, and we did it with technology that pretty simple. It was compared to today. I mean, there was nothing like you and I sitting here talking across the ocean, Atlantic Ocean. Like it was a telephone call, but we see each other as well. So I really do think that it was worth the gain. Even after the fire, we had the same kind of people that said, "Why is it all worth it?" 3 astronauts were killed on the pad, and you hadn't even launched. And so we did have those naysayers but I said the same thing then, that, hey, we're trying to learn here. And anytime you're learning, you're going to have, particularly with humans involved in it, you're going to have missteps and mistakes. And it's just like airplane. I think commercial airplanes, if you fly them long enough, one of them's going to crash. I mean, it's just, you have the human element in it, and it is risky. It's not as easy as walking. And so I think there's a reason for it. And I never felt, I heard some of those comments when I was around, but they kind of bounced off of me. I didn't even think they were there. It was such a small minority, vocal, very loud, but small. And most of the people are saying, go for it, get it, do it. And we're very proud. People all over the world, not just Americans, we're very proud when we went to the moon and did it successfully. And we felt like, the whole world was with us for the most part. Russians might not have been, the Soviets may not have been quite so, but even I think they came around to the point that was, hey, well done. And I think it's one of the reasons the Apollo astronauts particularly are very close to the Russian cosmonauts of that era. We didn't get to know them very well in mission control. A few I've met, but the astronauts are very, very close to each other with the cosmonauts. And it did feel like a kind of a world accomplishment. It did to me. I was glad we could do it.
Oui, et vous le dites, on peut dire que c'est international de toute façon, parce que quand on pense que les catadioptres qui ont été posés sur la Lune étaient faits en France, ou que les pieds du module lunaire ont été conçus à Montréal, au Canada, et même toutes les découvertes qu'on a faites à partir des échantillons qu'on a ramenés, oui, c'était complètement international. Donc on a planté un drapeau américain, mais au final, ça a bénéficié au monde entier.
Yep. And I've always, the flag was because we had the ship, but or it would have been like a ship landing on a new coast and saying, okay, nobody owns this, so we're going to put our flag on. But I felt like it really, Neil said it, it was for all mankind and humankind, I guess we would say today, to be politically correct, but it was a great accomplishment for everyone.
Oui, et puis même, bon là je digresse peut-être un peu, mais si on pense à Yuri Kondratyuk, vous le connaissez?
Oh, yeah, 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 yeah.
C'est quand même
Yeah,
quelqu'un
yeah.
qui a dessiné la voie d'Apollo.
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Donc oui, même l'Union soviétique y a indirectement contribué, mais on pourrait même revenir
Yeah,
en arrière et parler de Newton et parler de Galilée. Tout ça, ça a permis Apollo. Apollo
right.
fait partie d'une continuité et s'inspire de l'héritage d'un héritage mondial
And
en fait. Donc vraiment, c'est une continuité quoi.
and and then Hubble Space Telescope has taught us so much more about what's even further out, and the people that will follow us in generations uh, will go there. I'm convinced they will go there. They'll go to some of those really, really faraway places.
On espère tous les deux.
Yeah, we do.
Justement, on a parlé d'apprendre de ses erreurs, d'apprendre des problèmes, des choses qui nous arrivent. Vous pensez justement que la mission Apollo 13 peut apprendre encore des choses aux futurs directeurs de vol, aux futurs contrôleurs de vol, et même aux futurs constructeurs de fusées pour les missions à venir?
Yeah, I think 13 taught us a lot. Every mission had problems. Some of those problems were nagging, and then some were pretty serious. But every mission, we learned something that helped us in the next mission, and the next mission, and the next mission. And I think that knowledge base, I really thought at the end of Apollo, I thought we would be on Mars in 20 years. Of course, I was kind of young and naive, and I just thought that would happen, but it didn't. And now we've had this 50-year break of deep space travel, but we've had a continuum pretty much of at least space travel, getting into space and getting out of space. And particularly the launch from Earth is probably, I think, is the hardest thing we do. And entry, you got to go through a lot of heat there, take all that heat out that you put in going up. But the heat or the fact that you've got all of this energy stored in this rocket. It's not too big. It's just to hold it all together while you launch and get going is very, very dangerous. So at least we've never stopped doing that. We've had something that was being launched. Now the commercial sector is coming in and they're launching. And they're going to stub their toes some, but they're doing well so far. They're okay. SpaceX had that one satellite failure, but they're doing okay. But every time we do this, we're adding to our knowledge base of what it's going to take to safely travel in space. And we've been able to do that for the last 50 years. We just haven't gone past Earth orbit, which I thought we would have with humans some time ago. But now we've got a chance. The young people that watch this are going to be the ones that are going to have the opportunity to go back to the moon, some of them, and on to Mars. And Mars is even not the last place. I think what we're going to do is keep looking for an Earth-like place so that we could literally colonize it and make the species live forever, or at least another 3,000 or 4,000 or 5,000 years. And I think it's just survival. It'll be that drive that will make it necessary.
Et justement, pendant ces moments où l'homme était cantonné à l'orbite terrestre, on a quand même envoyé énormément de sondes partout dans le système solaire, et on a découvert des mondes qui peuvent potentiellement abriter la vie, comme Europe, comme Encelade, comme Titan, et c'est des mondes qui sont pas forcément sur autour d'autres étoiles, mais qui sont vraiment très proches de chez nous.
And you're making a very good point, because I think the exploration of deep space is going to be should be a combination of robotics and then followed by humans. your robotics spacecraft or your scouts, they're the ones that go find out what's there and is it promising, and could we do something with that, either mining it or living on it, whatever. And so I think that combination of robotics and humans are necessary. In the old days, we didn't think that way. Not even in the Apollo years, we felt like we had to go first with people. Although we did have surveyors and other kinds of robotic ranger that went to the moon, and the Soviets had their Lunokhod and stuff like that. But we didn't think of it in terms of that was a precursor. We just thought that's kind of okay, but you really got to get humans there. Well, I know in the last 50 years, I've come to the point of realizing that robotics coupled with humans is the way we're going to get this done if we're going to go into really deep space and stay there.
Ouais, oui, je comprends. Bah, je suis complètement d'accord avec vous.
It's not one versus the other, it's both. Yeah,
Oui.
it's not one.
Oui,
yeah,
bah, c'est
it's
une combinaison. Donc maintenant, on va parler un petit peu de film, puisque vous avez été le consultant technique sur Apollo 13. D'ailleurs, vous allez peut-être être un petit peu biaisé par cette question, mais qu'est-ce que vous pensez du réalisme dans le film Apollo 13 ? À quel point il est réaliste par rapport à la vraie mission Apollo 13 ?
The Apollo 13 movie is actually very accurate technically. Now, when I remember the first day on the set after I had met Ron Howard before, but the first day on the set, he said it then, and he probably said it a half a dozen times later. I'm not doing a documentary. I'm putting together an entertaining movie that I want to be factually correct, but I've got to have license to maybe make things happen a little differently, but it wasn't the what happened, it's how it happened. Let me give you a good example. The movie opens with a scene where everybody's gathering up, and I think they're going to Armstrong's house or maybe Jim Lovell's house, but they're going to somebody's house to watch Apollo 11 land. And so they got all these astronauts and all these people, and that didn't happen. But what Ron said was, it's a way I can introduce a bunch of characters at once. And it had nothing to do with the technical side of Apollo 13, but it was a way he could get a lot of characters introduced in the movie. He said, if I don't do things like this, he was kind of teaching, I think, a little bit. He said, if I don't do things like this movie will be 4 hours long. And he said, I'd like for it to be around 2 hours. I think it came out 2:20, 2 hours and 20 minutes. But as the movie went on, it's the first movie I had worked on, I could see what he was saying. He told me, he said, if you see anything technically wrong, let me know, and I'll fix it. And he did. And he made it a little more emotional. For instance, like when Jack Swigert was replaced on the crew, or he did the replacement of Ken Mattingly. They played it up that Lovell and Hayes were a little bit standoffish. They didn't like him or didn't think he was, and that never happened. Jack was extremely well prepared, and they felt bad for Ken Mattingly getting bumped off the crew, but it didn't have anything to do with technically. It was making the thing more emotional and entertaining. And I can tell you, although Gene Kranz was a pretty serious guy, he wasn't anywhere near as serious as Ed Harris turned out to be. I worked a lot with Ed on his part because he was a flight director, and of course that fit my bill. And so I worked with him closely. He's a great actor, but he he was portrayed in a little more as being abrupt, and Gene has a little of that quality to him, but nothing like.
Un peu moins militaire, c'est ça que vous voulez dire?
Yeah, yeah, and but Gene is Gene's pretty serious, but Ed did a good job, and he did exactly the way I think Ron wanted him to come across. But again, it didn't have anything to do with the technical aspect. I'll give you one more example. When you'll remember on 13, we had to figure out a way to get the carbon dioxide out. And we had a number of square containers in the command module, which was turned off, but they wouldn't fit in the lunar module round hole. So you had a square peg trying to go into a round hole. And you probably know the story. I know you do, but your listeners probably do too. Is that figured out a way to do that with tape and paper and plastic and all kinds of things. Well, that was done by a group of guys at Johnson. That group was run by a guy named Ed Smiley, and he did collect everybody together and say, okay, what have we got on board? We've got these things, and how can we make this happen? And they figured out what was on board and what to do. Well, in the movie, if you recall, the guy walks in and he's got this bucket of stuff and he throws it on this table and says, okay, that's what we got. Now we got to figure out how to make this thing work. And of course, that didn't happen that way. But again, technically, it didn't. It was just the way he set it up. It didn't have anything to do with what the technical outcome was. So there were places in the movie like that I finally got my engineering brain to accept. And but I did have some comments after the movie that, why'd you let him do it that way? Or why'd you? And I said, hey, I wasn't the director. I was an advisor. And but it was a great experience. It was fascinating. And one of the things I learned about the movie business, and I saw it later in Contact and Deep Impact, is that those people worked very, very hard to get it right. And they reminded me in many ways of the space program. They were goal-oriented. They would work any hours to get it done. They dedicated to the task. I mean, once they started, it was as hard a working team as all of them as I've seen. And at the end, a lot of satisfaction. So it was a little bit like the space business that I had experienced, where you had this dedicated team of people. Let's get it done and work hard.
Toujours en parlant du travail de consultant technique, vous avez eu de la chance parce que vous avez travaillé quand même avec des réalisateurs qui vous ont écouté, comme vous le disiez, parce que j'imagine que ça devait être le bordel pour le consultant technique du film Armageddon.
Amen. And when you got into real fiction, which we did with Contact, but of course it was based on a book written by Carl Sagan, who was a renowned astronomer, that there was technical realism in it. And so that was good. Deep Impact was total fiction about splitting a comet. And that one, about all I could do is help them with what it looked like. And for instance, in Deep Impact, I went back to Robert Duvall's farm in Virginia and spent a couple of days with him going through the script before we actually started shooting. Did the same thing with Jodie Foster in Contact. And those kinds of actors and actresses work hard at even their hand motion. They want to get it right. I remember Duvall wanted to know, do you hold, it had kind of a shuttle type of controller in this fictional spaceship. And he wanted to know, do you hold it tight, or do you, kind of grip it, or do you kind of light touch, and I gave him the light touch because sometimes you had to grab it because for other functions. But my point is that these guys really prepare. And I started with, my movie career was people like Tom Hanks and Ron Howard and Bob Zemeckis is the director on Contact, and Jodie Foster, and then young director Mimi Leader, but Robert Duvall on Deep Impact. And so I kind of started at the top. Instead of most of that business starts from the bottom, you have to work your way up. And I kind of started at the top. And I was fortunate, and I learned a lot about it and developed my creative side of my brain a little bit better than it was. It's still, when you're an engineer and used to exactness and all that, it takes a little training, at least, or sometimes kind of looking the other way to say, okay, all right, let's go. But it was fun.
Oui, et puis vous faites une transition parfaite pour ma prochaine question. J'imagine que quand vous regardez des films spatiaux, vous avez toujours un petit œil à analyser les choses pour voir leur réalisme. Et justement, qu'est-ce que vous pensez de Seul sur Mars et de son exactitude en termes humains, c'est-à-dire en termes de résolution de problèmes et de travail en équipe?
Well, I think they're all thought-provoking and thought-provoking in a good way. I mean, it makes you think about what would you do in those situations. You can either totally panic and do something wild, or you can kind of start figuring it out, see if you can use the central computer and try to figure it out. I really think the whole idea of movies in general, it changed it for me to watch a movie. You mentioned space movies, and that's where I'm probably more critical in thinking. But all movies, to me, after I've worked on them now, I'm more interested in how did they do that? Kind of idea. How did he get that impression, or what's that lighting? I was always interested in lighting and how and sound, and some of the sound guys. And it was funny. I remember my first film, Apollo 13, when we had a break for a lighting change or whatever. I would immediately either find Tom Hanks or Ron or somebody, and I wanted to know how they were doing this and what they were thinking. And they wanted to talk about the real mission. So it was funny, we would kind of start this conversation with me talking about the real mission and them talking about something that, them talking about the real mission, and I was talking about, well, why'd you like that way? So today, every film I watch, it's hard to enjoy it as much because I want, even the new stuff, I want to look at how they did it. And so it's kind of an interesting fallout. I really think that the space movies that have been made lately are good. They're and they've got technology and capabilities that weren't around in 1994 when we were filming Apollo 13.
Bon, vous savez, Apollo 13 est encore très réaliste aujourd'hui. Quand on le regarde, il n'a pas vraiment pris de coup de vieux parce qu'en fait, il a été tellement bien filmé. Enfin, quand on pense que les scènes où il flotte, il flottait réellement dans un avion 0G, parce que c'est quelque chose de très difficile à reproduire, et dans les autres films, c'est très difficile de le reproduire exactement sans faire un vol 0G. Et du coup, c'est intéressant parce que, personnellement, je pense que si on prenait une image de Apollo 13, le film, qu'on le mettait avec un effet VHS et qu'on mettait à côté les images de la vraie mission, on pourrait avoir les deux mêmes résultats.
You know, those pictures on 13 when the crew was in the spacecraft and it was so cold and their breath that really happened. They put that thing inside it was so cold inside that set. The cameraman had on Alaskan type hoods and gloves, it was cold. And those guys would, Bacon and Kevin Bacon and those guys would get out and they would be shivering. They'd be really, really cold. And so that's another realistic thing that they were able to do that I thought was amazing. So they took that whole sound stage and sealed it up and took it down and made it go. Well, anyway, that was, I think the movie depictions that we see now are more and more realistic all the time. And that's going to make it particularly good for the young kids that they know that, they're smart. They can tell a fake when they see it, but between the computer graphics and the other technologies that they've got now, they can really make things look real. And I'm sure you do some of that in your own business.
J'essaye, hein, j'ai encore beaucoup à apprendre là-dessus. Et ce que j'aime avec Apollo 13 et Seul sur Mars particulièrement, c'est que contrairement à tous les autres films, par exemple First Man, vous avez des astronautes vraiment très 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 tristes, assez dépressifs, qui font pas vraiment face aux problèmes et qui sont vraiment passifs. On dirait qu'ils subissent les choses, alors que dans Apollo 13 et dans Seul sur Mars, ils sont vraiment actifs, ils veulent résoudre les problèmes, etc. Et je trouve que c'est d'ailleurs dommage parce que justement le travail d'un astronaute, d'un directeur de vol, d'un contrôleur de vol, c'est résoudre des problèmes. C'est vraiment ça, c'est résoudre les problèmes les uns après les autres.
Yeah, it's the challenge. Yeah, that's what makes you enjoy it. Yeah, it's not what everybody does. I mean, this is different. So, no, you're right on.
Et justement, en parlant de résolution de problèmes, en ce moment on est en train de vivre une situation très difficile. La plupart des gens d'entre nous sommes confinés, loin de nos familles pour certains, seuls pour d'autres. Est-ce que vous auriez, en tant qu'ancien directeur de vol, peut-être des conseils à donner ou des choses à partager par rapport à ça, au fait de résoudre ces problèmes-là et d'en apprendre quelque chose?
I can only speak for myself. I think the training I had in Apollo helps. My own philosophy is that this can be beaten, but you have to follow some careful steps, just like we did in the space business, and you have to play by the rules. You can't ignore the fact that you're facing a threat, just like we did in 13. We knew it was a threat, but let's not get all. And yeah, we had to do things differently. We didn't sleep for 3.5 days on the ground. Those guys slept hardly at all in space. It was hard on them, and there was always that danger that they might not make it, although we never talked about it and never discussed it. But I really think in this time right now, we're being tested as a species, if you will, to a threat that is it's probably not going to result in as many deaths as the 1918 flu epidemic worldwide, but it's not going to be a small impact. And when it's over, rather than I know in this country at least, we'll probably spend the next 2 years talking about what we did wrong. What I'd like to do is spend the next 2 years, what did we learn? What did we learn that worked? And what did we learn that didn't work? So the next mission or next pandemic, we can apply what we learned to that one. The fact that we made a mistake and all was not as important to us as getting it right the next time, and don't let that mistake happen again. So yeah, I'm sure we can learn a lot from this about the ways to face the next pandemic. One of the things is we've never had a pandemic where we had such great communication around the world. The internet, television, all of that has given us this instant idea or positioned by one guy or the next guy or the next gal or whatever. And we've got to learn to live with that too, because a lot of it is bogus. It is not very good. Some of it's excellent. But I wish there was a way we could put a filter in somewhere that says, okay, listen to this one because it's really, really good. Now, we do that amongst ourselves. You'll say, hey, I've gotten a number of things. I said, you got to watch this one. It's a great, I saw one the other day. It was a cartoon type of video, but it's serious in the way the virus works and the way it moves around and is excellent. It was really easy to understand the way it mutates and does this and that and so forth, and or the way they think it does. And so I think we're being tested right now to see if we can stand up. I think back even on this one. I think back to France in World War II and what the people there went through with the Nazis and particularly the Jewish community and all. That is horrible and unthinkable, and yet it happened. But we learned from it. And we didn't. That I don't think will ever happen again. And so that's what we've got to learn about handling these pandemics. And some periods of isolation are going to be necessary, and we need to learn how to do that. I think most of us are. It's kind of an on-the-job training. You never tried it before, but you can't just start going off and trying to do things like you used to. And but I think we'll come out of this okay. And I think that we got to have a positive thought. I don't think we don't need to rush it. We need to figure it out. And we got people here, I don't know about in France, but we've got people here that want to open up everything, because, well, we haven't had many cases in our town or whatever. Well, you're just asking for it, I think, at this point. Now, maybe there'll be a way to do that carefully and get it everything back online. And, but I think my space experience helps me in that. It's just, I hadn't thought about that, but it's just ingrained in we got a problem, let's attack it and see if we can fix it. And come out the other side smarter.
Oui, je suis complètement d'accord avec vous et j'espère que tout ira bien pour vous et pour votre famille.
And you.
Merci. Et justement, je pense qu'on a de la chance quand même d'être dans un moment où on a quand même Internet qui nous permet, tous ces moyens de communication dont on parlait tout à l'heure, qui nous permettent quand même de garder notre cerveau occupé et aussi de communiquer avec nos proches, même s'ils sont loin. Et c'est vrai que là-dessus, on a de la chance, je dirais.
The other interesting thing, Winston, I think, out of all this is what is the new normal going to be? I think we're all really conscious of washing our hands, for instance, and being careful when you cough or all of that. And then I think the question is, how long will it be till you hug somebody that you haven't seen in a long time? That's going to be interesting. Are you going to bump elbows or hit fists, or exactly what are you going to do? And so all of that's the new normal may be a little different than and that's okay.
Oui, ce sera intéressant et comme vous le disiez, vraiment la meilleure chose à faire, c'est d'apprendre de ce qui s'est passé et de faire en sorte que ça arrive jamais.
And go forward.
Et d'aller de l'avant, en effet, et d'aller de l'avant et même au niveau spatial.
Yep, same thing.
Merci encore Gerry, c'était un vrai plaisir.
Well, thank you, Vincent.
Et j'espère qu'on aura encore l'occasion de se croiser tous les deux. J'espère que cette petite interview vous aura plu. Si elle vous a plu, bien sûr, n'hésitez pas à laisser un like, un commentaire, à partager et bien sûr à vous abonner, c'est très important. J'aimerais aussi en profiter pour remercier Lucas et toute l'équipe de Suisse Apollo, qui est un organisme en fait qui vraiment travaille pour la mémoire des missions Apollo et qui organise plein d'événements en relation avec ça, avec des astronautes, avec des contrôleurs de vol. Et c'est eux qui m'ont donné cette occasion d'interviewer Gerry Griffin. D'ailleurs, en parlant de ça, il y a Lucas de Suisse Apollo qui a sorti l'année dernière un livre absolument formidable qui s'appelle Apollo Confidentiel. Et Apollo Confidentiel, en fait, c'est un livre qui recueille énormément de témoignages puisqu'il a eu le privilège de parler avec beaucoup de monde qui a travaillé sur les missions Apollo. Et du coup, c'est une mine d'or. Donc si vous êtes un passionné des missions Apollo, c'est un bouquin qu'il vous faut absolument. Bien sûr, je vous mets le lien en description. Merci encore donc à Suisse Apollo, merci à vous d'avoir suivi cette vidéo très spéciale, et on se retrouve très bientôt pour de nouvelles aventures. Ciao!